So some interesting news coming out the last few days here on the UAP topic. This one here was dumped on Reddit, and while we can't exactly verify it, of course they say it's verifiable. Wherever they got this documents, they have all the links. So I mean, you can absolutely check it out and kind of go from there. So this is quite interesting. Essentially, what they're saying is that when it comes to UAP investigations and people making FOIA requests, it's got to go through the DoD, the intelligence community. They say any report generated as a result of these investigations will by necessity include classified information on military operations. Therefore, no release of information to the general public is expected. Talking about classification levels of UAP information obtained in whatever form and from whatever source involving UAPs is classified. Imagery, including stills, videos obtained by Snoopy teams, whatever that means, of any UAP observation is considered classified and should be handled and protected accordingly. So even if something isn't classified, they deem anything that's UAP, doesn't matter where it came from, which tells me whether it's military or from the public, they get control of it, they get to classify it. And how they handle FOIA requests and responses. The FOIA offices are requested to coordinate their proposed responses to any UAP-related FOIA request with DoD Public Affairs and OpNav N2 and 6 Public Affairs before responding. So if the FOIA office gets a request, they automatically have to go to whatever these offices are and essentially ask for permission on what to do. They say that consistency in wording in any response for information is essential, as additional queries and FOIA requests can be expected if there are any deviations from what has previously been provided in response to query. So essentially they've got all their templates set up. So when they reply to something, it's got to be the exact same wording so no one can question anything or try and poke holes in their replies. So very interesting information. They have the comment here. It's very funny how they say the intent of this card is not to circumvent the normal FOIA process conducted at the command or higher echelon levels, but yet that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to limit the information that people can access. And like I said, they have the links here, so you can go and check that out. I'll leave the link to this Reddit thread as well, so you can go ahead, download these things. I'm just going to go along this thread here and point these things out. But this is great because once it's out, it's out. Before it'd be like the news would publish something and then they would take it down if they didn't like it, and then everyone's lost access to it. But it's there, so take it while you can. And in this email, I guess maybe there was sort of a miscommunication or they had a question, but they're saying, thanks for reaching out. Megan is correct. From a public affairs perspective, all media inquiries on UAPs go to the DoD Public Affairs. Keep everyone in the loop, and they coordinate closely. They have not authorized any media interviews on the subject. Make no comment. The nuances of all this are such that any deviations from the statement that DoD makes results in multiple news stories and additional FOIA requests at various levels. And clearly, they don't want that to happen. And this is funny too, because they say, generally speaking, they let the normal FOIA process work as it's supposed to, ... But we've been requesting that FOIA offices coordinate with us on UAP focused FOIA responses before they hit reply. And I assume that's a pretty strong request. I bet that's a demand. And so that new terms and language, etc., aren't introduced that complicates the overall messaging efforts. Doesn't sound like they're worried about messaging efforts. It's just they don't want any messages getting out, period. And they've also given them a security classification guidance document that addresses the UAP issue and what may/may not be discussed publicly. So after the DoD is saying, we got nothing, there's nothing there, this document comes out saying that they want everything classified and they want everyone to shut up and not talk about it. And then they highlight this point here saying, simply being unclassified does not automatically mean that information may be released to the public. An OSD internal review, not a formal investigation, determined that while a request has been submitted in August 2017 to the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review for release of the videos to government and industry partners for research purposes, DOPSR did not grant final approval for the video to be released to the general public. So even when things aren't classified, they do not want anything getting out, and they want the final say of the public affairs. So it seems for people denying everything and saying that they're hands off, they are fully involved in exactly what's going on with the releases and what's in the media. So it's no wonder that anyone who releases anything is just hammered on hard shortly after. So quite interesting, and you can dive down into the comments here and see what other people are commenting. Now, I don't normally go on Reddit. It's just not my favorite place to be. But the UFOs subreddit seems to be chock full of information, which is fantastic if you're on this topic. And you'll even get things like this, just a normal user here saying any ideas what they could be. And they have a photo here, they've enhanced it. Looks to me like a sort of triangular craft with lights in the sky there. They're just trying to figure out what it was. Just someone general doesn't really seem to be involved with the topic judged on the comments. And they were just curious. And really, there's no way of knowing. We can only guess. Is it a military craft? Is it not? They said it's too big to be a drone. It hovered and silently. So it's not a helicopter or plane because those are pretty obvious. CBS News also says that a UFO investigation launched in Japan after the U.S. report designates region as a hotspot for sightings. Quoted, "It is extremely irresponsible of us to be resigned to the fact that something is unknowable and to keep turning a blind eye to the unidentified." This is great to hear because from what I heard from other YouTubers is shortly after the US Aero report came out, Japan came out with one of their own, and they pretty much said the same thing. Yeah, nothing to see here. We don't know. I don't know. Don't worry about it. So it sounds like they've changed their tune, which is fantastic. Because even if you look at what happened with Fukushima, people reported seeing bright lights, bright orbs in the sky. And you'll hear from channelers and other sources as well. And these orbs were there cleaning up the disaster. It would have been multiple times worse for everyone and the environment if they hadn't showed up to clean up the mess. So that is quite interesting. So now, how can we prove it? I have no idea, but there's plenty of footage out there that you can see of these orbs flying around during these types of disasters. So it's kind of silly for them to say, yeah, no, there's nothing there when they've been there to help clean up these disasters. Congressman Burchett tells Matt Laszlo that Grush's witnesses will be part of the next hearing. When the next hearing is, I don't know. But Tim Burchett does say that'll be part of the next hearing. Some of those folks, I'm afraid to give out too many names because, as you know, what happened the last time we had like 12 people that were coming in. We ended up with 3. People got scared. Some say they were essentially threatened and they were told by their bosses or higher ups or whoever that they will not be a part of that hearing. And they got scared and they sat out. Now, same thing could happen. I'm sure the people who want to prevent this thing already know who these people are. Grush says he's got 40. You can get 12 to come in. That's fantastic. Stephen Greer says he's got like 750 whistleblowers ready to go. So where are they? It's fine to say all of this, but essentially you won't believe it till I see it. This is another famous one that was going around from Ukraine. Some sort of drone hovering above the water. It has been published again just to sort of keep this alive because this stuff gets buried so quickly. Ross Coulthart on News Nation also has a 1 hour, 40-minute long speech that you can watch. I'm going to just point out some of the highlights because obviously you're not going to sit here and watch the whole thing. But definitely, when you have the time, check this out. There's a lot of gems that Ross reveals. And it's great to hear about his history on how he got involved in the topic and the people he's been able to talk to. And like with anything, there's a lot of people saying, well, just give us the sources, give us the information. This is all just people talking. Well, that's how journalists work. They have to protect their sources or they'll never work a day in their life again. But anyways, I'll play some clips here of what I thought was pretty great that Ross is sharing. It's things we already know, but again, it's just confirmation of what's going on and what's been happening.
And time again in my career, I was given very clear indications that contrary to that perception, this was something real. I was doing a story for an Australian public broadcaster on the Royal Australian Air Force, and I was with some very, very senior officers at the end of a day's filming. And after the second beer, one of them leaned across the table and said, "Why don't you chaps do stories about UFOs?" And quick as a flash, I came back and I said, "Oh, because they're nonsense." And he said, "No, they're not." And in the course of an evening, he was calling pilots across from all over the room in this officers' mess at an airbase and saying, tell them what you saw. And they're going, "You sure, boss?" And he goes, "Yeah, tell them. And all these pilots had seen these weird objects and they were talking about them and they were thrilled, almost relieved that they could talk to somebody like me about it. But would anybody go public about it and talk about it? No way. There was so much stigma. Nick, to his enormous credit, pieced together that Trimble had put together a team in 1957 researching anti-gravity. And yet 2 years later, all these stories started appearing in the popular press where Trimble was making the extraordinary claim that the conquest of gravity, quote, could be done in about the time it took to build the first atom bomb. Respectable scientific journals were referencing the work of Thomas Townsend Brown, claiming that in experiments which had been peer-reviewed, he'd achieved anti-gravitic effects cutting weights by as much as 30%. And one very interesting aspect of T.T. Brown's work was that when he'd arrived at the best shape for an anti-gravitic craft, intriguingly, it was disc-shaped. Yet that supposed scientific breakthrough didn't happen. It's never happened. And if you allow 5 years or so for an equivalent program to the atomic program, it should have happened in the early 1960s. And so Nick's book had left us with the tantalising probability that there'd been sometime in the mid-50s a breakthrough in anti-gravity propulsion that was quickly suppressed by the military or by the government. Because if I was to think of the one person who I wanted to speak to me, it was him. His name was Nat Kobitz. He was the US Navy's former long-time Director of Science and Technology Development. This is something he'd been briefed into in his official capacity. He did admit that on one occasion he was flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, literally taken deep underground, taken to a secure room and shown what looked like some kind of bulkhead from a craft which he believed was constructed in a way that defied conventional explanation. The craft's skin and inner bulkhead were composites bonded at an atomic level. He suspected it was non-human intelligence technology. I'm told this was hidden long ago in private corporate aerospace, in full anticipation that the day would come when Congress would start asking questions.
So anyways, there's your UAP news for the week. Lots of action still happening. Like I mentioned in the other video, when things start to get quiet, you know there's lots happening in the background. And this is what we need more of, just people being called out on their BS. They're saying one thing, they're doing a completely another thing. So these organizations, these families, they've had their fun. Time to give it up. Let peace reign through, and we'll be all right. These past 100 years, release all the technology, and then we'll be exactly where we should be in our spiritual and technological evolution, versus just shoving everything away and keeping us in the same spot while just throwing us a few toys here and there to keep us distracted. Thanks for tuning in. Check these links out. I'll leave them in the description below, and I'll see you on the next video.